For Mountaineer Nation, it has been a whirlwind of a couple of days as West Virginia has lost a coach on the offensive side and a star player on the defensive side. Let's go. What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Jordan Cruz back here with the Country Roads Webcast. And before I get into this video, I just want to give you guys a quick reminder. If you would, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button, give us a like on this video. It'll really help its performance and help future videos performances here on the channel. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Helps us, helps you, helps get more of this Mountaineer sports content out to Mountaineer Nation. Having said that, let's get into it. All right, so 2 losses that West Virginia has suffered is what we're going to talk about in this video. Obviously, Graham Harrell deciding to go to Purdue was big news, taking the offensive coordinator job there under their new head coach, Ryan Walters. And then following that, I think even more breaking, maybe because it was more surprising, I guess, was the Jordan Jefferson entering the transfer portal news. So that's kind of the 2 things we'll talk about here, starting off with the Graham Harrell news. But let's talk a little bit about the state of the West Virginia football program now and get into these 2 topics, as I know it's a hot topic around Mountaineer Nation. A lot of people are worried. That's why you see in the thumbnail the question, is the sky falling? I don't believe it is. I don't want to panic right now. I know that it kind of seems dire and things are not in a good state. I agree with everyone there 100%, but let's just talk about it here in terms of digesting the information as far as West Virginia losing an offensive coordinator, talk about some potential candidates to replace him, and then let's talk a little bit about the transfer portal, what West Virginia has lost in Jordan Jefferson, and how they may replace him, as well as some other players at other positions they are targeting because they really have to win the transfer portal this offseason. Not only if they want to be a successful team next season, which right now seems like a long stretch, but also if they want this fan base to come back around, we need to see some big transfers come in. So let's talk a little bit about what West Virginia has going on here with transfer targets later in the video. But first, let's talk about potential offensive coordinator targets. All right, so the news of Graham Harrell leaving broke just a couple of days ago, coming from Adam Rittenberg from ESPN. I'll throw the tweet up here on the screen so you guys can see it. This is what initially broke the Graham Harrell news, but nonetheless, Graham Harrell leaving WVU after 1 season to go to Purdue to take the same position as offensive coordinator there in the Big Ten Conference. I think, even when Graham Harrell was hired, you can go back and listen to our podcast when we talked about it. I thought that it would probably be a 1-year deal. I think a lot of us thought that it may be a 1-year deal due to Graham Harrell maybe taking a head coaching job. I know he was sniffing around a few of those, North Texas, of course, being one, and I believe there were some others that were potentially looking at him as well. Ultimately, he leaves to take another offensive coordinator job. I think back when, he got the job, we were thinking that because we thought we would have a really successful season. He would be, be on the market for a lot of head coaching jobs and move on to become a head coach. But I think all in all, when you look back at this tenure, you can say it's successful, say it's not. I'm not going to debate you on either one of those. But what I will say is that I don't think it's what we expected initially going in. I don't think, on either party's end, whether it be West Virginia's or Graham Harrell, I think, Graham Harrell thought coming in, he had a team that was going to be really successful in this conference and maybe boost him finally to that head coaching plateau that he wanted, especially getting JT Daniels. And I think West Virginia getting Graham Harrell and JT Daniels thought they were really going to have an explosive offense. Maybe they misjudged the addition of Graham Harrell and how it would fit here at WVU. Maybe Graham Harrell wasn't happy with how he was used at WVU. I know there's been talks along the way of Neil Brown maybe having his hand in the offense more than Graham Harrell would have liked. I don't know if that's true or not. I can't speak to that one way or the other. But what I can tell you is that Graham Harrell is leaving WVU to go to Purdue, which, you can debate that being a lateral move one way or the other, but it's not a lateral move as far as he's not being promoted to a head coach. He's taking the same position as an offensive coordinator. And what I also can tell you is that he's paying WVU a buyout. I'm not sure if Purdue was covering that or he is, but it's over $400,000. So he is willing to take, a job with the same position at a school that's arguably similar talent level wise, respect wise around the country, reputation wise, prestige wise, and he's paying over $400,000 to do so. So in my opinion, that speaks to a problem at West Virginia. And I think, we'll talk about the transfer of Jordan Jefferson here in a bit and talk about, the coaching staff had talked about this offseason. They thought they were really going to do a good job of keeping their core together. And I think when you lose one of your star receivers and one of your star defensive tackles, it seems like they're a little bit out of touch with what's going on with this team, whether it be, that comment about keeping the core together. You can even look back, this preseason they were talking about this is going to be the best defense we've had, and we've seen it was the worst defense they had. So it's just time and time again, seems like they're completely misjudging things. So I don't know what to make of that. And then with the Graham Harrell thing, he's willing to, pay over, nearly $500,000 to take the same position at another school. So does that speak to a culture problem? I don't know. I'm not saying that there is. I'm just pointing out facts of this situation and that are kind of, to me, raise eyebrows. Like, why would he want to do that? To me, it's one of two things. Either there's a culture problem at WVU that would make Graham Harrell want to leave because he doesn't like the environment. That's an issue. Or he didn't have, full control of the offense like it was said that he was going to when he was hired. Neil Brown saying he would have full autonomy, and maybe Neil Brown had more of a hand in it than he liked, and he wasn't able to run the offense the way that he wanted, because we talked about during the season even the offense not looking like a traditional Graham Harrell offense. So that's another factor to me, maybe. Nonetheless, whatever the reason, we can speculate that on all we want. We can speculate on that all we want to, rather. Graham Harrell leaves West Virginia, heads to Purdue. So now the West Virginia Mountaineers have a staff position to fill on the offensive side. Personally, my thought about this is I'm not mad about this, because you guys have heard me talk since, the final games of the season, and of course here throughout the offseason. I think West Virginia is in a great position next year to be successful with the type of offense they ran in 2016 when Dana Holgorsen transitioned to more of a power spread kind of offense with Skylar Howard and Wendell Smallwood. Wendell Smallwood led the Big 12 in rushing. West Virginia won 10 games that season. I've talked time and time again about how West Virginia's been successful with dual threat quarterbacks. We've got two quarterbacks that can run on the roster, and Nico Marchiol and Garrett Green. Neil Brown is 18-4 at West Virginia. That's his record when West Virginia runs for over 100 yards as a team. He's 18-4. So we've had success running the ball under Neil Brown already. The offensive line run blocks more than it pass blocks. You have four good running backs, potentially two of them, just freshmen this past season. I think it's tailor-made for West Virginia to transition to more of a run-heavy type of offense, like when Dana used that power spread type offense in 2016 with offensive line coach Ron Crook, that really did a great job leading that power attack. And still have your air raid concepts in there in your route trees for your receivers if you would like, I think, and maybe incorporate that into your passing game, into the play action stuff. But I think you just lean more run heavy. You add more power run plays, you add more read option plays, you add more triple option plays to go along with that, and you run kind of a marriage of the air raid and the spread offense, a little bit like I said, the 2016 West Virginia offense. If you want a reference point, go watch some highlights of games from that season when West Virginia won 10 games running that type of offense with Skylar Howard and Wendell Smallwood. But I think that's their best course of success for next season with the pieces that they have. So I hope they bring in an offensive coordinator that's able to transition into that kind of attack. But who they will hire, of course, let's talk about that. There's plenty of names being thrown around, so I'll just run down some of these really quickly for you guys. I've got some outside candidates, of course, probably names that you've heard. And then I've got three names of potential in-house things that I think West Virginia could potentially do if they don't want to hire an offensive coordinator, maybe just hire another assistant, whether it be a quarterback's coach, as Graham Harrell was the quarterback's coach, or if they want to transition someone to quarterback's coach and hire another position coach, they could do that as well. But let's start with some of the outside names here. The outside names, I think you've probably heard a lot of these, but starting with the Tricketts, of course, I think they've been thrown around the most. Travis Trickett obviously is the name that pops up, I think, immediately to everyone. He was here, had great success as a recruiter. I mean, he brought in CJ Donaldson, brought in a lot of the guys on the West Virginia roster right now. Left prior to last season, to become the offensive coordinator at the University of South Florida. However, he did have good success there with that offense. The offense wasn't really the problem there at South Florida, but their head coach was fired, so Travis Trickett's out of a job. So I think obviously the connection is there that he could potentially return to West Virginia, but the thing that could potentially hamper that from happening is the fact that he is going to be a hot commodity. I think he's going to be up for some other offensive coordinator jobs as well. West Virginia may have to fight for his services. Would he choose WVU other places? Potentially, but is WVU also willing to get into a bidding war? I don't know. And then of course you got his brother Clint Trickett. We all know, former West Virginia quarterback, had been the Marshall passing game coordinator, was promoted this season to full-time offensive coordinator. This was his first year calling plays, kind of a mixed results there for him at Marshall with the Marshall offense. So that might make him a little bit of a less attractive option for West Virginia just because he's only called plays for 1 year, and the Marshall offense was a bit of a mixed bag this year. But you definitely got to throw his name out there, of course, when you're talking about this. And then I think the name that maybe appears to be the favorite around the fan base that you're hearing buoyed the most, that the most people are really wanting to see West Virginia make this higher. And I think rightfully so because of his success as an offensive coordinator, but also he has those air raid ties. So I don't know if he would transition the offense into the place that I would like to see it go moving forward. However, he does, lean more into the run game than many of the air raid people before. And like I said, Dana Holgorsen has even shown in 2016 he can transition his offense into that type of scheme. So I think this guy could potentially do it as well. So I would definitely not be mad about this hire. I'm not saying that by any means. I just don't know if it's my absolute favorite, but I certainly would be excited if West Virginia did this. It probably would be coined as a home run by many around, and that is Seth Luttrell. The former North Texas head coach was just fired from North Texas, obviously. Obviously, he has ties to Ren Baker, who was just at North Texas as the athletic director. And Seth Luttrell really had great success as an offensive coordinator. He had top 15 offenses in the country at multiple places when he was an offensive coordinator. He had top 15 offense at Arizona, top 10 offense at Indiana, top 15 offense at UNC. So everywhere he's been a coordinator, he has had great success with his offenses. His offenses at North Texas were even successful as well. And like I said, he's been endorsed by many in the fan base, but not even many in Mountaineer Nation endorsing him. He's also been endorsed by Ryan Switzer, who we know is West Virginia native. Didn't get a chance to play for the Mountaineers. That's a whole nother story we won't get into, but I'll throw this tweet up here from from Ryan Switzer. As you can see here, big fan of Seth Luttrell, obviously from his time at UNC, and I think West Virginia could do much worse than hiring Seth Luttrell to run their offense in 2023. Definitely would not be a bad move. But moving on along, I got three more names here as far as outside candidates that I think have been thrown around. One of which here is obviously going to be a fan favorite, and that's Pat White. Pat White, obviously currently now an assistant coach with the Los Angeles Chargers on the offensive side there, has been a coordinator in the past at the college level and a quarterback's coach nonetheless. And I think maybe, I don't find this one very likely, West Virginia bringing in Pat White to run their offense when he's never really called plays at this level, I hate to say. However, there is a possibility, and I would not rule him out, coming to West Virginia as the quarterback's coach. As we know, Graham Harrell was the offensive coordinator and quarterback's coach, so that's kind of dual positions West Virginia has to fill there. If West Virginia decided to hire someone else as an offensive coordinator or make someone in-house, the play caller, and still had to hire an assistant to coach the quarterbacks, I would certainly be down with Pat White potentially being that person to come in and be the quarterback's coach. And then beyond that, you have two more names here that I think these are far more likely than the Pat White name, and that is Mark Whipple. Obviously, he was Nebraska offensive coordinator this past season. With Scott Frost being fired, Matt Rule has made another hire at offensive coordinator to bring in his own guy, so Mark Whipple out of a job there. Previously, of course, was Pitt's offensive coordinator in 2021 when they won the ACC title. Kenny Pickett, first round draft pick, Heisman finalist, and Mark Whipple's offense was a big part of that. As you can see, Pitt take a big step back this season without him there. He's had success at every stop he's been, and the tie here with Mark Whipple obviously is with Neil Brown. He was Neil Brown's college coach back at UMass and also gave Neil Brown his first job as a graduate assistant that kind of got him into coaching. So there's certainly a tie there with Mark Whipple, and he's a guy that's had successful offenses in the past as well. This may be my favorite, actually, of the names. I would like to see West Virginia go after Mark Whipple. Don't know if they would or not, but I definitely think the ties there with Neil Brown that you certainly got to reach out and kind of test the waters and see if there's interest there. And then the last one, I haven't seen this one thrown around too much this time, but I know when West Virginia was previously looking for an offensive coordinator last year, this was a name that was thrown out there due to ties with Neil Brown, and I think now there's even more ties with this name, and that is Tommy Maynard. Tommy Maynard, currently the offensive coordinator at North Texas, or at least was, rather. I'm guessing he's going to be out of that position as well with North Texas bringing in a new head coach, so he's looking for a job, so he's going to be, potentially available. Obviously, the North Texas offense been very successful. Ties with Neil Brown. They spent time together coaching together at Texas Tech and at Kentucky, but also in North Texas means he has ties to Ren Baker, West Virginia's new athletic director. Mentioned that with Seth Luttrell. Obviously, both of these two, Tommy Maynard and Seth Luttrell, were together at North Texas. Ideally, if you're going to get one of these two, you would want to get Seth Luttrell, but maybe Seth Luttrell doesn't want to come to West Virginia, so you go after Tommy Maynard. I don't know, but it's definitely an option there. Those are kind of the outside names that I have there, just kind of six real fast outside names that have popped up. Not saying that one of those six will necessarily be hired by West Virginia. There's certainly a vast majority of candidates that aren't even discussed here. I'm just kind of going over some of the names that I've heard pop up that I think could definitely be possibilities that have ties to the West Virginia athletic director or to Neil Brown himself. And then I think the most likely scenario, though, in my opinion, is that they make a move in-house and make someone either the offense coordinator in name and Neil Brown calls the plays or whatever. And I think if that does happen, these are the three names that you're going to look at there. Obviously, Sean Reagan, who was obviously co-offensive coordinator year before last, before he was demoted heading into this season, following the hiring of Graham Harrell, excuse me. Then he was demoted, moved from quarterbacks coach to tight ends coach. But he does obviously have experience coaching quarterbacks. He coached quarterbacks for Neil Brown at Troy. He coached him here early in the tenure at West Virginia. So potentially he could transition back to the quarterback coach role, slap a co-offensive coordinator title on him or not. Don't give him the co-OC title back. Neil Brown takes over play calling duties. Sean Reagan goes back to quarterback coach, and they hire another assistant that's a great recruiter. That's a possibility. Not a fan of that one personally, really. Obviously, the offense struggling as it did, and you transition a guy to tight ends coach, then moving him back to the same position you had before. What does that say? Don't think that's a good look. Hopefully they don't do that, but think it's a possibility. Chad Scott is the name I want to talk about. Obviously has the co-offensive coordinator title now, is the West Virginia run game coordinator. We know the West Virginia run game was the most successful part of the offense this past season. The West Virginia running back room has been phenomenal. He, in my opinion, is the best assistant coach on this coaching staff. Chad Scott, I think, I would love to see him get promoted to full-time offensive coordinator. My only issue with this is I don't know if Neil Brown would let him call plays. That's the question that I'm asking here. Would Neil Brown let Chad Scott call the plays, though? I don't know if Chad Scott's ever called plays. I don't believe he's ever done it at the Power 5 level. I know he's had a co-offensive coordinator title. He's been involved in the offensive game planning potentially, but the question is just would Neil let him call the plays? And I don't know if he would or not. I would hope that he would, and I hope that if he would promote Chad Scott, he would let him call the plays. But then that brings me to my most likely replacement for Graham Harrell. And a lot of you guys aren't going to like to hear this. I personally am not a fan of it either. But I think what we're most likely looking at for 2023 is Neil Brown. Neil Brown will probably take back over the play calling in 2023. I hate to say it, but it's probably the most likely, especially when you're looking at it from Neil Brown's perspective. This is his make or break year. He's got to win. Who's he going to trust more than himself? We know he's a micromanager, really hands-on type of guy. So in my opinion, I think that the most likely option out of all these is probably Neil Brown takes back over play calling duties himself. Maybe he gives someone on the staff the offensive coordinator title and hires a quarterbacks coach. Either that or he'll move Sean Reagan back to quarterbacks coach and hire another assistant that is a good recruiter to coach another position, maybe tight ends if you're moving Sean Reagan, obviously. I think that's probably most likely, but there's some names to look out for as far as potential replacements for Graham Harrell. That's the offensive side of the ball news. Let's flip it over, talk a little bit about the defense and what is, in my opinion, an even bigger loss, and that's the loss of Jordan Jefferson to the transfer portal. And let's talk a little bit about the transfer portal and some of the players West Virginia is targeting as well, as they've sent out a few more scholarship offers. So let me update you guys on that list as well here moving forward. All right, so if the Graham Harrell news didn't cause enough of an uproar, then the day later, you get this breaking from On3 Sports. Actually, I'll throw the tweet up here for you guys from Matt Zenitz. Jordan Jefferson entering the transfer portal. This one sent shockwaves throughout Mountaineer Nation, obviously, because this is one of the main key cogs I think you needed to keep, especially defensively when you're losing Dante Stills. You've already lost Taj Austin. You know, you're bringing back Sean Martin. You're bringing back guys on that defensive line, but this was kind of your key piece. I think especially with when you saw how he filled in for Akeem Mesidor, we really were worried about the West Virginia nose tackle position with the loss of Akeem Mesidor and how much of a star he was for West Virginia in 2021. But in 2022, you didn't really feel that loss, and a big part of that was because of Jordan Jefferson. 3 sacks on the season, consistently was one of the top 5 highest graded defensive players according to PFF, game in and game out. If you followed along on our top 5 highest player grades video series here on the Country Roads webcast. So really hate to see this loss. This one hurts. Like I said, I always like to preface these transfer videos by saying the player could potentially return always. Just because someone enters the portal doesn't mean they necessarily have to leave. And I think this offseason, you're going to see that a lot. Some players hit the portal, see what type of offers they get, and potentially maybe come back. Fingers crossed, Jordan Jefferson does do that and returns to West Virginia. That's all we can hope at this point. But we'll see what happens moving forward with Jordan Jefferson. But if he does indeed move on to another program, which is obviously more likely once they enter the portal than them returning, it's going to really be detrimental for West Virginia moving forward. And I can understand why the fan base is very upset, because this one hurts, in my opinion. It hurts just as bad, if not worse, as the Akeem Mesidor news when you got it last season that he was transferring. And, a week ago, we were talking about how West Virginia had done a good job on retainment as far as transfer portal is concerned. I don't know if you can really say that necessarily now, as you lost a starter on offense and now a starter on defense and a key cog on defense, a star player on defense. And it's unlucky number 13 here. As I share the screen with you guys, you can see the transfers out list for West Virginia. Jordan Jefferson becoming the 13th player there, as I said. Unlucky number 13 there, of course, being the worst and most detrimental to the Mountaineers moving forward. But I'm not going to run through them all, obviously, as you see them all there on the screen. Jordan Jefferson being the latest. But what I will run through real quick, I will scroll through this for you guys, as you all have probably been following these transfer portal updates throughout the offseason. You've probably seen this list already. But here's a list of some guys West Virginia has offered scholarships to that are in the transfer portal. I've been trying to remove some guys that they've committed to other programs as much as possible, add more players as more scholarship offers have gone out. But I'll try and scroll through this. I'm not going to read every name. I'll talk about some of the newest ones, the latest ones. At wide receiver, there is a new one there in Jashawn Polk from Kent State, as you may see. Tight end, I can tell you Cole Taylor from LSU was on campus visiting West Virginia. So hopefully maybe West Virginia is able to get a commitment from him, or even get him to sign a letter of intent on National Signing Day. Moving on, as you see, a few offensive linemen there West Virginia is targeting. No new names there since I've last updated this. Defensive line, there is a new name there. It's an in-conference name, Philip Bleedy from Texas Tech. But I did want to focus here on defensive line. Since Jordan Jefferson is leaving, you hope to definitely add at least a couple of these potential transfers here. Braden Fisk from Western Michigan, Shane Cokes from Dartmouth, Anthony Goodlow from Tulsa, Andre Carter also from Western Michigan, Elijah Judy from Texas A&M, John Morgan from ESP, Philip Bleedy from Texas Tech. Those are the defensive linemen West Virginia has offered so far in the transfer portal. And I got to think maybe with Jordan Jefferson leaving, they may even offer a couple more defensive linemen now. We'll see. And then, of course, linebacker-wise, Amari Gaynor has been on campus at West Virginia from Florida State. Would love to see the Mountaineers potentially land him. I can tell you that as well. Other than that, no new names there at linebacker. Defensive back, there are a few new offers that have gone out, a few of which I want to talk about. A couple in-conference ones, Jabbar Muhammad from Oklahoma State and Reggie Pearson from Texas Tech. But then you also get Jalen Catalon from Arkansas. And then one right here, Isaiah Johnson from Arizona State. This one's very interesting to me because he's actually from the same high school that I went to. Of course, I went there many moons ago. He graduated, of course, more recently from Bluefield High School. I don't think he actually graduated from Bluefield High School, though. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he went to a prep school in California for a year, but was one of the top recruits in the country at the time. I think his sophomore or junior year, he was the number one cornerback in the entire recruiting class. ESPN 150 recruit, went out to California for a prep year. I think he ended up as the number 12 cornerback in the country that year, maybe top 15 player in the state of California, if I'm not mistaken, but ultimately went to Arizona State. I believe he was a redshirt freshman this season, but has entered the transfer portal, and immediately West Virginia sends him an offer, former in-state native Isaiah Johnson there. So that's a cornerback to look at. I know we're talking in-state natives. Still haven't seen an offer come out for J.J. Roberts from Wake Forest, another in-state cornerback, but he has visited. So we do know that West Virginia does have him on campus. So he's got to potentially be a target. Hopefully a scholarship offer goes out to him as well. But there's the defensive backs West Virginia is targeting, and a look at some of the names West Virginia has offered so far in the transfer portal. But having said that, what are your thoughts on both of these departures, whether it be Graham Harrell or Jordan Jefferson? Who do you want to see potentially replace Graham Harrell? What would you like to see West Virginia do with the offense in 2023? How do you feel about Jordan Jefferson leaving? Do you think this is going to continue to be a problem for West Virginia, as it's now the second consecutive season they have lost a star nose tackle? And what are your thoughts on some of the targets that West Virginia is potentially looking to replace him with in the transfer portal or at other positions there? Any thoughts you have on transfers, offensive coordinator candidates, Graham Harrell or Jordan Jefferson's departure? Please let us know in the comments. We'd love to interact with you guys as we continue to try and grow the Country Roads Webcast community throughout Mountaineer Nation. But that'll pretty much wrap us up for this one. As always, I'm Jordan Cruz, and until next time, let's go Mountaineers.